Welcome to Huddle Sessions with TiE Singapore.
Hi everyone, my name is Siddhi Dheer and I serve as the Executive Director for TiE Singapore. Thank you for joining us in our third Huddle session at TiE. In the face of the current COVID-19 situation, we started this initiative to discuss and share founder and investor perspectives of various topics relevant to the startups. In these times, when a business is striving to be in a survival mode, how should they aim to create consumer stickiness? Today's session is a deep dive on this topic. Moderating this discussion would be Dushyant Sapre. Dushyant is the JPAC Managing Director for Mopap at Twitter. He advises leading mobile platforms in the region on building and monetizing audiences across borders. Before I hand it over to Dushyant, few housekeeping rules. For questions and answers, please use the Q&A button either located at the top or bottom of your screen. This recording will be shared with all post the session. As you all know, we are getting accustomed to the new normal of working from home. There is a possibility that there might be connectivity issues or some unwanted background music. So please bear with us if such a thing happens. Lastly, we would be keen to hear the topics you would want us to discuss in the future Huddle sessions. So please mail us your suggestions. Over to you, Dushyant.
Thank you, Siddhi. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone, and good evening. So today we have two great panelists who are going to talk about really sharing their perspective and point of view around how do we continue building consumer businesses in this COVID environment. So we have Roshni Mahtani, who is the founder and group CEO of the Asian Parent. She has over 15 years of media and marketing experience across the US and Asia Pacific. And a lot of people, especially the parents, and during these days, would definitely be going to Asian Parent to really understand how do we ensure that we end up becoming even better parents than we were before. At least I have kids, so I can vouch for this and really understand how do we ensure that the kids can stay at home in this lockdown period. At the same time, we also have Abhi Kanand, who is the managing director with Sequoia Capital, based out of Singapore, where he focuses on early stage investments in Southeast Asia and in financial services for consumer internet and deep tech. Abhi himself, just like Roshni, was previously a co-founder of a startup that was acquired by Facebook. So what we are going to do for our panel discussion today is essentially touch upon 3 to 4 different broad themes, looking at what has changed, how do we adapt to this change, what is changing, and how do we manage this. And finally, then looking at or possibly going into the mental health side of things as well. So it will be a very interesting discussion, hold tight. And with this, now I think I would like to share the premise of managing change. So what has happened now is COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdown has had a significant impact across all economies globally, particularly the offline heavy regions such as emerging Asia. Managing change in business and in life, therefore, has been very different in emerging Asia versus developed countries where internet penetration rates are extremely high. So my first set of questions is really around understanding how are we managing this change. Roshni, how has the consumer behavior on the Asian Parent changed since the onset of COVID?
Hi, everyone. And, thanks for tuning in to watch us at TIE. And I'm really grateful to the whole TIE team for putting this together. I participated in every huddle since it started 2 weeks ago. And so I'm really excited to be able to sit here today and share my thoughts and opinions with everyone. Dushyant, just coming back to your question, I think it's a tough time for parents across Asia at this moment, right? Especially with those with young kids like you and me, kids who are under 7 years of age with working parents, preschools and infant cares all across Asia are pretty much shut down right now. And specifically here in Singapore, we don't even have confinement nannies. Women who have just given birth recently, they can't live with their parents, they can't live with their in-laws. In-laws and parents can't help them through the whole newborn period. So a lot of them are navigating the first few months of parenthood alone, which is something that they've never done in their entire life none of their friends, their siblings have gone through this before. So I think it's a really, really new state of parenting for young parents all across Asia. And we see that parents are extremely stressed. They're very, very stretched, especially working moms. A lot of the working moms are at breaking point at this moment. They're struggling with work. They're struggling with running a family. They're struggling with dealing with housework, because in markets like Philippines and India, where it's not normal to have domestic helpers living in-house with you, where domestic helpers usually come every day for a few hours to help you out with your chores, all of that has gone. So a lot of people don't have any help at home right now, and they have to suddenly navigate this. And so we're seeing quite a lot of trends emerging because of this. One trend, which is a very negative trend that we're seeing, is that divorce rates are rising across Asia. And we're seeing 20 to 30% more traffic going to our questions and answers about divorce. So more conversation on our app is going on about separation, divorce, marital disputes, children custody. We're also seeing a lot of rise in anger and discipline issues at home. In Singapore specifically, canes are pretty much sold out in all grocery stores around Singapore. So parents are really losing their cools with their kids. Many are struggling with the right type of discipline. They want to not go into their old school style, child with a slipper or with a. But the fact of the matter is that they are at breaking points at this moment. We also ran a survey recently, and we saw that there's an increase in demand in online tutoring, e-education, storytelling online grocery shopping, and e-commerce. And we also see that kids' TV time, video time, has actually shot up quite a lot. So pre-COVID, mostly people were, with young kids, they would watch about 1 hour of TV every day with their kids. Now that has shot up to 3 to 4 hours at minimum. We're also seeing that moms are not yet cutting down their expenses on their kids. So they're still buying their expensive milk formula and the things that the kids want. But they are cutting down on other household expenses, luxury products. They're cutting down on the clothes that they buy for themselves, makeup that they buy for themselves. So they're cutting costs for themselves, but not really their children yet. And when it comes to like reading content, visiting our website, going on our app, we're seeing peak traffic come in during weekends, which is quite an anomaly, because previously we used to see our peak traffic during weekdays. But this time around, moms are so stressed out that they're not necessarily surfing around for content because they have no time. So those are some of the emerging consumer trends we're seeing in the parenting and family category at the moment.
Thank you, Roshni. I think I would tend to agree with almost all of it. I see that happening already in my personal life, especially the weekend part, where weekends are now like, let's do something. Abhik, I think changing gears a little bit, but still continuing with the managing change theme, and talking really about the B2C startup space. Are there now different kind of startups, that you're now looking to invest in and support? And if yes, what kind of traction does Sequoia now expect to see before even considering?
Cool. Thank you, Dushyant. Thank you, Ty, for having me. And thank you, everybody. There's 121 participants. So thank you for taking the time this evening to join us. One of the questions that we at Sequoia ask every time we meet a new company, and this is a question that gets asked across all of our partnerships in the US, in China, in India, and definitely in Singapore as well, is a very simple 2-word question, which is why now? Which is, why does this business deserve to exist today and did not deserve to exist, say, 5 years ago? A strong answer to that question often indicates that there is an inflection point in the market, which means that something new has happened. For example, if you were to meet a business in 2009, 2010, chances are that the answer to the why now question is that the smartphone era is emerging. And people are suddenly carrying around, really powerful, always connected devices in their pockets. Or if it's a B2B company, chances are the answer to that could have been that the cloud is emerging. And so therefore there's a shift to cloud software versus on-prem software. And, I would argue that especially in B2C, there hasn't been much of a platform shift over the last few years. Mobile was really the last big platform shift that happened. What is happening as a result of COVID? And, I want to preface that by saying, obviously what is happening is an international tragedy at large, and like I will sort of, that's almost table stakes and given, and I won't take any time talking about it. But when it comes to opportunities, and all of you guys have alluded to this in the past, it is resulting in some pretty fundamental changes in consumer behavior, right? So we are doing a webinar right now, sitting in our living rooms. I'm sitting on my living room couch where frankly, I've been sitting for the last 6 weeks and working from here. Now that is a pretty profound consumer shift for me. My entire team is sitting from home and doing Zoom calls back to back every single day. We are interviewing candidates, right? And we are making job offers without ever having met those people. We are meeting founders, and we are not getting on flights anymore. Instead, we are trying to figure out live demos. We are trying to figure out conversations with consumers without getting in front of them. This is actually a really, really big and profound set of consumer behavior changes that are happening in almost an unprecedented amount of time. And so, to your question on what we are seeing as potential opportunities here, if you were to see what is now possible with these new set of consumer behavior shifts, it's actually quite different than what was possible even in January. A very simple example of that is, let's look at, this move to digital, right? I mean, we've been talking about, hey, remote work for the longest time. Now suddenly my grandmother actually has Zoom on her phone, which like blows my mind, right? And if for the folks who have children, they're doing school over video calling. They're getting in touch with their friends over all sorts of apps. I had a friend who had a birthday party globally on a Zoom call last week across 4 different time zones. So to us at least, that presents a set of opportunities in what would happen if you were to rethink the way basic consumer services are delivered in a post-COVID world. Because while we will conquer COVID and all of this will get behind us, some of these consumer behavior shifts are going to be around for a very long period of time. And if they stick around, like, what is the new way for us to interview candidates? What is the new way for us to socialize? Do we need to get on a flight every time? Do we need to do work by sitting in person together? How do we collaborate? How do we, talk to our parents? How do we, find a significant other? How do we entertain ourselves? What kind of games do we play? All of that stuff is being reimagined in this world. And so, look, we'll come on the other side and there'll be a very significant human, economic, social, political cost that we will pay for it. But it will come with a new set of consumer behaviors and a new set of opportunities. And, we're always on the lookout for more such things to emerge.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhi. I think what I'm hearing from both you and Roshni is that this new normal is at least for the time being, is going to stay and it won't last forever. So perhaps it's also a good time to think about how our founders and VCs also need to adapt. Everyone in the industry needs to adapt to continue focusing on the long-term fundamentals, which is essentially in line with how the future would look like and a few years from now. So Roshni, I think what notable changes are you making to adapt to this changing consumer behavior, be it related to running your operations or offering value-added services relevant for the current times?
Sure, great question. So I'll look at it at 3 different parts. So the first part is for our consumers, right, which predominantly right now are young mothers. So for the moms, we realize that they don't have time to read news as often as everyone else. They're either busy with their kids or they're, doing housework, and they're very stressed out. So we made sure that they would be able to get the most relevant COVID updates on statistics in terms of number of infections, number of death rates, which town, which county, and FAQ questions on COVID in multiple languages. Like, should you be worried about COVID during pregnancy? Should you be worried about COVID when you have a young baby, etc.? So we give them all of those updated information on a COVID tab, both on the app as well as on the website. We also, for the most active parents on our app, which we call the VIP parents, we started storytelling for them every single night at 5:30 p.m. So you can tune in and we'll be having one of the Asian parent staff telling you a story in a local language. It could be Mandarin, it could be English, it could be Thai, etc. And they'll be reading storybooks to the community at around 5:30, because this is the time where we know most Asian moms go into the kitchen to start cooking dinner. So we say, we'll entertain your kids while you can start cooking. And that's been a resounding success. For our clients, we have started COVID report trackings, which tracks the sentiments of young families across 6 Southeast Asian markets. And the report is updated monthly, and we couple it up with a free webinar for the brand so that they can understand the needs of young parents at this moment, as well as the shift in consumer behavior. So where are they buying? Where are they shopping? What are they actually choosing to cut down expenses on, etc.? And for our team, which of course is at the end of the day, the heart of the company. If we don't take care of our people, if we don't take care of the Asian parent team right now, then who are we, right? So we've started 5 initiatives for the team. And this is especially for people who have caregiving duties. Now, it could be that you have young children at home, or if you have aging parents, etc. So we offer flexi work hours. You can choose any 8 to 9 hours in a day to work. So you can start your day at 5 o'clock in the morning, or you can choose to start your day at 5 p.m. at night. It's up to you. We also offer flexi work days. So you don't have to work from a Monday to Friday. You can choose to work on a Wednesday to Sunday, for example, so that you can split caregiving duties with your spouse. We also have free all the stuff. So we sign up for 5 different tutors so that our parents with kids under the age of 10 can get free tuition. And then we also have an option of a 4-day work week right now with full salary. And then at the end of the day, we also give parents or those who have elderly they have to take care of an option free unpaid sabbatical at a personal salary. So these are some of the initiatives that we've started thinking of our audience, thinking of our brands, and thinking of our in-house team as well.
I think, Roshni, we might have lost you, but it seemed to me that you were almost to the end of what you were trying to answer. Thank you, Roshni. Abhi, in the same context of adapting to the now situation that we are in, I mean, and excluding the obvious e-commerce, grocery services, which are normal to see the spike, how are your B2C investments now adapting to this crisis, especially with these multiple constraints knocking the door, which could be ranging from tweaking the entire marketing strategy or even going to the extreme of going for a pivot?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. And rather than talking about specific companies, I'm happy to share a framework that we are using to think about our entire portfolio. So the framework basically goes along the following lines. Think of your business as sort of a business across 2 broad dimensions. The first dimension is, do you have a proven economic model and an economic engine? And the second is, what does your balance sheet look like? Right? I mean, look, there are obviously going to be some businesses that are going to be very, very materially negatively impacted across the board. Like if you're selling physically and if you have a retail chain, like, you're basically shut down completely. But assuming that's, let's ignore that part for a bit. But if you have a business with a strong economic engine, and if you have a pretty significant balance sheet, we are recommending to those businesses to really double down and increase the gap between themselves and their nearest competitor. That's the ideal position for everybody to be. There's a lot of businesses where, they've raised enough capital or they have visibility to enough runway, either, through the existing balance sheet or through insider support. And we are doing a lot to support those companies as well. But they may not have a proven economic engine. What I mean by that is either their unit economics don't completely work, or there are some questions around the way their product is priced, or whether there is complete product market fit or not. I think for those types of companies, we are recommending use this time to really make some of the hard business choices that you need to make to get to a place where you have an economically viable business. That could include, for example, changing your pricing strategy. It could include changing your go-to-market. It could include, pretty fundamentally altering some aspect of the business to make it economically viable in the long term. What happens in a regular market is founders are often so focused on growth that they don't make those sacrifices to fix the underlying economics. The reality is numbers in 2020 are not going to matter. So it doesn't matter if you grow 3x or if you grow 2x or if you grow 50% or if you degrow. This year is a bit of a wipeout. So it's a good time to fix fundamentals for those types of companies. And then, finally, there are companies where, they may or may not have a proven economic engine, but, they don't have enough runway, let's say, beyond 12 months. For those companies, we are recommending to sort of really focus on cash conservation and make sure that you have enough runway to last, ideally as close to 18 months as possible, if not longer. Because, what you want to be doing is, if you're going to be out raising a round, assume that you may not be able to do that, let's say, for the next 6-8 months. You want to be able to go out and raise with at least 8 to 12 months of runway. So for them, it's all about cash conservation, really sort of making sure that you survive through this crisis and come out stronger on the other side. So, kind of depends on what category the business is in, and we're trying to give them, different advice and guidance based on that.
Thank you, Abhi. This was extremely insightful. Roshni, continuing with what you shared just a while ago, I think I would like to now change the premise of where we are and take the entire scenario in an assumption-based scenario and look at a really pessimistic, environment. And let's assume that, this lockdown is going to stay throughout 2020. I mean, we don't know, right? We were expecting 4th of May, and then now it's 1st of June. That 1st of June may become, God knows, 15th of June. I hope it's not longer than that. But let's assume that one of the scenarios that could play out is it takes longer for the entire world to come out of their houses, which also means economy for it to pick up will take much longer. Perhaps at some point of time in 2021, maybe end of this year, maybe even later. So in such a scenario, and with this sort of assumption, and it's more like a forward-looking 2020, how would you look at building or rethinking the core aspects of revenue and talent management?
Really good question. So I think, the first thing that I would do is if our lockdown is going to be longer than the next 6 weeks here in Singapore, which was just what was announced yesterday, is I'll go to the grocery store and buy as much whiskey as I can because I'm going to need that to survive. So that's the first thing I'll do. Then the second thing is, of course, I think ultimately we have to all look at our business fundamentals. Like Abhi was saying, right? We really need to make sure that the unit economics make sense. This is something that all founders should already have been doing. But of course, the world was a very different place last year and everyone was looking at growth at all cost. So we didn't necessarily always look at our unit economics to see if it made sense. Also, a lot of times when you have done decent fundraisers and you're growing quickly, and we definitely have seen that as well, because last year we closed a pretty substantial Series C, is you don't bother looking at all the cost very carefully and you just go, hey, right now I really want to just focus on growth. So I think that this is an opportunity for all founders to really look at cost cutting. Whatever it is, we all have fat in our company. Now, whether it's about rent or whether it's about, solutions or marketing that we've been spending on, or even things like certain tech subscriptions we've been doing, it's time to go and renegotiate all of those contracts. We have managed to, negotiate some of our rental contracts down by 40%. We have been able to get 3 months subscriptions to quite a lot of the softwares that we have been using. So I think this is an opportunity to really renegotiate a lot of things right now. And you have to imagine that the world is going to hell and that you need, whatever it is, you need to make sure that if revenue goes down to just 10%, you can still survive the next 24 months. And so on our end, that's what we've been doing this last 1 month, figuring out where can we cut cost as much as possible. And then the second thing is, I think we really, really need to make sure that we're focused on increasing revenue. It's going to be really hard to fundraise at this moment. Even if you do manage to get some VCs interested in you, the due diligence process is going to take forever because they can't come to your office, they can't talk to your team. So my thing is, if you can avoid the VCs right now, avoid them. It doesn't matter. Don't talk to them. Build your business. Go out there and speak to your clients. Every single time Sequoia tries to call you or Vertex or anyone else, ignore that call. Pick up the phone and spend that 1 hour speaking to your clients instead, because focus on revenue, because that's a much easier sale at this moment. So, and even if you do manage to fundraise right now, the fact of the matter is that valuations are going to be hit really hard. So if you can fundraise at the end of the year or next year, try to do that instead and just focus on building up your own revenue. And I think when it comes to focusing on not just revenue, but also focus on your accounts receivable, make sure that you're collecting cash. And so on our end, our finance team has been working day and night to look through our client list and figure out who's a AAA credit worthy client and who's not. And we don't want to be the victim of the fact that they may go through bankruptcy and not be able to pay us what they owe us. So we try to make sure that we do as much cash collection upfront. We give discounts to make sure that we can, just get our accounts receivables to as low as possible and as much money into our bank account at this moment. So cash is king. And I think all founders need to focus on cash at this moment.
Thank you. I think
Sorry,
it will be it will be interesting to see what Abhik has to say about this. So Abhik, I think going on similar lines of if we were to see this lockdown going longer, how would you see the investment thematic that you just mentioned about, the framework that you were talking about that you are witnessing now? Would that dramatically change for your pre-Series A and Series A rounds? If someone were to come in with this crystal ball and tell you, hey, you know what, this lockdown is now for 1.5 years.
Yeah, look, I think first off, I will say I'm in violent agreement with Roshni on at least one thing, which is that we should all make a run to the whiskey store and make sure we are well stocked up if that were to happen. So on the same page on that. Look, here's the reality, right? I mean, at some point, what's going to happen is that every government and every economy is going to have to make a call on a trade-off between how long this thing lasts and what are the costs of doing this. And I think the reality is, there is a cost of all of us staying at home every day. And it's very hard to trade off economic cost versus human cost. We don't expect there to be a lockdown for, anywhere close to the period of time that you're talking about. What we do expect, however, is that there is going to be a pretty significant amount of time before the economy rebounds to anywhere close to 2019 levels, right? And even when it does rebound, I do think the state of the economy is going to be actually quite different in that, discretionary expenditures are going to be spent in different ways. Businesses are going to look very different. A lot of businesses will have disappeared. So, from our perspective, the point of view that we are looking at on sort of at least the economy is that the rebound period is going to be nowhere close to the V curve that, people sort of sometimes hypothesize. It's going to be a bit of a prolonged recovery, and we should all be prepared for that. And then, do many of the things that Roshni was talking about as well, which is, focus on revenue, focus on sustainability. Today, if you were to meet companies that come to us that are, inherently reliant on capital markets being back at 2019 levels anytime soon, that for us is a red flag. Right? And that's always been a red flag for us because, it's always the question of, hey, do you need so much capital because the business is so capital intensive or because the economic engine has not been proven out? I do think that focus on economics, that focus on profitability, which, I remember there was a Mike Moritz, who's, one of the senior partners at Sequoia. His comment in a recent article in The Economist was, the laws of economic gravity have caught up again as they do every few years. And that is absolutely true, right? I mean, unit economics are the laws of physics in business, right? You can ignore them. You can pretend that gravity doesn't exist and you can throw yourself off the building. But I can guarantee you that you will probably hit the ground pretty hard. Now, somebody might come up and lift you up a little bit higher, but unless you figure out a way to be self-sustaining and escape the law of gravity, you cannot fly, right? And so in today's world, this idea of a white knight investor coming in and sustaining a business for a prolonged period of time in the absence of an economic engine is not likely going to fly. And so, our advice to all our founders is, hey, make sure that you have the basics of your business figured out, and really act as if this round, the last round that you raised, was the last round that you will ever raise. I was on a board call last week, and one of the conversations we had was, hey, throw out the business, and this is, by the way, a conversation we're having with every company, throw out the business plan for 2020. The business plan that you presented in the board meeting in Jan 2020 does not matter, right? It's irrelevant. Have a business plan that is made today in March or April or May of 2020, right? And then have an alternate business plan which talks about what would the world look like if you raised zero amounts of external equity capital. It's an important thought exercise to have. Some people can't actually come up with a business plan to make the business work, which means you need to make some pretty hard changes to the business. Some folks can, which means that there is a fundamental economic engine that's working, and so they have a higher chance of surviving if, like you said, this lockdown lasts a lot longer. So the wheat gets separated from the chaff, and it's important in this environment for everybody to focus on the fundamentals of their business.
Speaking of, yeah, you're right. I think extremely relevant point. And one of the thoughts that got triggered while you were talking about speaking of the total health and, end-to-end, every aspect of business and focusing on revenue. I think one other aspect which has started coming out a lot, especially, and I think Abhik, I would love to know your thoughts first as an investor. And I think, Roshni, I think I'll ask you right after that, is really around this concept around mental health. right? Everyone is talking about mental health and happiness quotient, and we have to survive during this tough time. So obviously the times are hard and survival is paramount, but happiness is not easy to come by for founders. So what advice would you like to share, for the founders who are struggling with balancing the growth, the revenue, sustain, survival, and the happiness which is required inside the mind? Because if you're not happy, how are you going to, shower your happiness all around?
Yeah, look, one of my partners had a blog post last year where he, I think the blog post was titled "It's Okay to Not Be Okay." And one of the biggest challenges I think founders face every day, and this is true regardless of what they say to their VCs or to prospective investors or to their board members, is this balance between external confidence and internal questions or internal sort of introspection. And the general rule of thumb for most people has been, hey, if you want to keep your team motivated, right? If you want to get investors excited about your business, if you want to get markets to think that you're a hot company, you need to get out, you need to chest beat. You need to tell everybody how amazing things are going. And, we see that all the time. And, look, I mean, everybody who sort of sees this, obviously takes it with a grain of salt, and we sort of put a bit of a caveat on it. But that's the default mode in which, for better or worse, a lot of founders operate. The reality is there's always going to be an internal voice that tells them, hey, what if this is not as good as I think it is? There are always internal doubts, and most people tend to suppress them. I think in today's environment, it is incredibly important for founders, and that is the reason why entrepreneurship is an incredibly lonely journey. You can't go to your team and tell them, hey, I'm unsure about whether or not this business idea is going to work or not, or whether or not this strategy is the right one. In today's environment is actually as more important than perhaps at any other time, where founders should find thought partners or people who they can surround themselves with, who can be a place where who can be people with whom they can be vulnerable. That could be their significant other, it could be a board member, it could be a core team which they've started the company with and they trust with their lives. It could be somebody external, I was reading a book on Google recently, and Bill Campbell was the coach at Google, and he is sort of the coach for many founders in the Bay Area, and an incredible person to sort of be a sounding board to. So look, I do think every founder needs somebody like that. That person may not be people like us. You may not want to talk to people like us about what's not working, but definitely find that person and rely on them to help you get through this, because really, it's okay to not be okay. This is a completely crazy world that we are living in.
Right. Roshni, I would love to know your views. I know you have pretty strong views around this, so I think it will be interesting for the audience to also hear about this.
Okay, because it's we've got 150 participants right now. I'm not gonna swear or use any swear words, and I'm gonna go very clean on this. But I'm so sorry, but for whichever founders are tuned in right now, suck it up. I mean, seriously, we're a founder, which means that this is not the point in time to have a mental breakdown. We are at war. You are on the Titanic. It is sinking right now. Why do you care about your own personal happiness? Why are we talking about mental health right now? We should be focused. We should be charging forth and say, I've got 100% focus on the now. You can worry about mental health next year when things are a lot better. But right now, as a founder, we cannot afford to fail right now. We cannot afford to be depressed. We can't afford to let emotions take the better of us. We just need to be crystal clear and know for the fact that we need to be the strongest person possible out there. And, really, if you're super focusing on saving your business and making sure that your team is okay, you don't really have time to worry about yourself. So for founders who are, teetering and going through depression and not feeling good right now, I would say, come on, let's focus on the now. Don't focus on your emotions. I know this is tough. All of us are going through it. And, I've been through the 2009 recession. My father lost his business in the 1999 Asian economic recession. And as a family, we went through bankruptcy. So I have seen economic recessions up close and personal. I was living in New York when the 2009 crisis happened. So I saw Wall Street come down to its knees. And I can tell you right now, the most important thing is you need to stay strong. You need to do whatever it is to make sure that you're optimistic, you're positive, and you're really, really focusing on your business at this moment.
Thank you, Roshni. I think we have a lot of questions that have come in. I'm trying to see which ones have not been answered through what you have already shared with everyone. There are a few interesting ones which we haven't discussed, and I'll try to take a few of them. In the interest of time, I think we might be able to just take up maybe 2 or 3 questions. So I think this one, the first one is actually for Abhi, which is essentially what are some of the trends that would emerge in the region's startup ecosystem post-pandemic?
Look, I think the region startup, because so there's 2 parts to this, right? Like, what is the new world order going to look like, and how does that affect Southeast Asia? I think the new world order is actually going to. I mean, here's the interesting thing about the pandemic. I would say there has never been a time in the history of humanity where there has been a single event that has affected every single human being on this planet. At least I struggle to think of any such event. So this is literally the first time this is happening. So I will actually take that question and turn that around. It actually doesn't matter. It's almost less relevant what the impact on our market is going to be. I think it's a global impact that we should be considering. And look, the global impact is going to be the kinds of things that we sort of discussed on this panel, which is one, human behavior is going to change. There's going to be a very significant social, political, economic, humanitarian cost that we will have to pay to get on the other side of this. And that's going to result in people acting in different ways. The best businesses that emerge from this are going to focus on the needs of humanity as they exist post this crisis and try to solve those problems. It's an inflection point, I would say, unlike anything that we've seen in the past. And with every inflection point, there comes a lot of challenges, but there also come a few opportunities. So look, the opportunity might be, trying to imagine a world where, a lot more gets done remotely, where digital becomes the norm rather than the exception, where, human relationships take on a different form, where, we start to engage with people in perhaps a more deep way in some ways and perhaps a more shallow way in some other ways. It's going to lead to so many opportunities that are going to come our way to reimagine the way some pretty fundamental things are being done. I'll give you one example. I was talking to a founder the other day, and they were asking, hey, how do I interview people in a world where I actually can't meet them? I want to hire a CXO, but I need to interview somebody. I need to interview 5 people, but I'll never meet them. What if the lockdown goes on for 3 months? I need this person to start before that. I think that's a great question, right? Like, how do we operate in a world where we can't meet people for a while? So trying to come up with solutions to those things, to reimagine the ways some pretty fundamental things are done in the world today, I think it's going to lead to a pretty broad and profound set of opportunities for all the founders out there to try to solve.
Thank you, Abhi. Roshni, I think the next question is for you, which essentially is related to the point that you raised, spoke about focus on the revenue and not focus so much on the fundraise right now. The question more here is that given the fact that COVID has impacted everyone, B2B or B2C, every business model is impacted. So how should the startups approach sales and revenue during this period?
So I think the first thing is everyone needs to be all hands on deck on sales and revenue. So for myself, last year, I pivoted away from focusing so much on the business and I started focusing on product and technology. So I double hatted as the chief product officer. The first thing I did this year was I hired a chief product officer. So around February and March, I was interviewing like crazy because I said I need to give product to someone else. As much as I love engineering and working on the product and working with my tech team, this is not the time for that right now. I really, really need to be focused on increasing revenue. And so I do believe that CEOs and founders now need to be a lot more sales focused and product focused. And so for myself, I started getting a lot more hands-on with the clients, with the team, and figuring out how can we really, really increase runway? How can we make sure we have a good grip on who our top spenders are and our basic business fundamentals. So I think that's one of the things that I would advise startup founders that try to get as many people looking at revenue at this moment, at least for the next 6 months. I'm not saying that you shouldn't fundraise in 6 months' time or 9 months' time. I'm just saying that for the next 6 to 9 months, you're much better off trying to, just increase revenue as much as possible.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Roshni. I'll now take up the final and last question. I think this is, again, coming a lot from an investor standpoint. So, Abhi, this is for you. What is the current sort of investor sentiment that you're seeing for Sequoia, and how do you see, different kind of ideas specifically coming out of Southeast Asia, which will be relevant for the market over here?
Look, it's a super broad question. So, let me try to at least share a few thoughts. One, there are lots of investors who are going to be actively looking at new companies to invest in, but we are operating in an environment which is very different from January, right? How do we invest in a company where we can't meet the founder face to face, where we can't go and talk to customers directly? I think a lot of investors are trying to figure out the right way to solve this problem, and we will solve this problem. But in the meanwhile, you should expect that by and large fundraisers take a little bit longer. Two, there are definitely going to be some venture funds that are not going to survive in this climate. It's not the best environment to go out and fundraise, much like it's not for some businesses as well. So I think it's important to pick the right partner. Three, I think you should think about what is the right type of investor to get on board. So for example, right, if you are at a point where you need to raise a seed round, you could consider saying, hey, instead of raising a institutional seed round, I'll do something that's more sort of friends and family and angels, and prove something out before going out and hitting the market when it's a little bit more open. I'll give you some examples of things that we are doing. We've been running Surge, which is our seed program, for the last year and a half. And this year, our Surge program, which has between 15 to 20 startups in each cohort coming from India and Southeast Asia, where we invest between $1 million to $2 million in each company. That entire program is being done on video because you can't travel, you can't meet in person. So we are trying to figure out innovative ways in which to keep business growing in as close to a BAU manner as possible. But clearly the world is very different, right? If you were to go out and try to raise a $50 million check from an investor who you've never met before, chances are it's going to take a lot longer. Some hacks that for you guys to consider, try to keep in touch with investors that you've met before and have a relationship with. Those are much more likely to convert in these current markets. Sort of rethink the way you want to go out and fundraise. If possible, wait for some of the markets to reopen before you go out and fundraise. Three, focus on some of the fundamentals. The same investor who last year might have been talking to you about, just showing 3x, 4x year-on-year growth is suddenly going to be asking you, hey, what are your unit economics and why are they not there on the first two slides? And so, people are going to be operating very differently. And, being prepared for that environment and being prepared to answer those questions is, really upon the founder to sort of navigate. So these are just some thoughts, feel free to drop me a note anytime. I'm happy to have a more detailed chat. But the world is going to be a very interesting place for the next 12 months. And I think there's going to be lots of challenges, but also lots and lots of opportunities.
Great. Thank you. I think we have now run out of time at exactly slightly more than what we were planning. Thank you, Siddhi. And finally, thanks, Abhik and Roshni, for sharing your POVs and your perspective. I think everyone would have enjoyed this conversation. I, for sure, have really enjoyed understanding how the divorce rates are going up as parents, the challenges we are facing, and typically what we have seen with respect to the businesses and how founders are coping, not just with the mental health, but also trying to, figure out the new plans for the business, at least for the time being, before we come back to the back to the normal life, which may have some variation to how the normal life looked back in 2019. So with that, I would like to thank the entire audience who came in today, and I will hand it over to Siddhi for the closing remarks.
Thanks, Dushyant. Roshni, Abhik, thank you so much. This was great. One line that I'll take from this discussion is, it is okay not to be okay, but deal with it. You cannot you cannot feel sorry about yourself. Unit economics makes more sense. Pivot from growth to unit economics, VCs to customers, go back to fundamentals and recreate your business plans. This was a great session. Thank you so much. All the attendees, thank you for attending. Our next session is next week at 5 p.m. on accessing capital. So, from a founder investor, we're going to the government and the banks to see how we can use and leverage those channels to access capital. So stay tuned and join in next week at 5 o'clock on Wednesday. Thank you again, folks, and see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Speak on Wednesday. Bye.